at 5:36 on a Saturday morning. I opened my front door to leave for work and found a 40-yard dumpster sitting directly across my gate. Not beside the gate. Not partly in the ditch. Across the only entrance to my property, it was rusted blue, overflowing with broken drywall, old carpet, paint cans, splintered cabinets, and black trash bags ripped open by raccoons. A cracked toilet rested on top of the pile like somebody had placed it there for decoration. Spray painted across the side were the words, Copper Ridge Community Cleanup. My truck was trapped inside my own driveway. And behind the dumpster, on the county road, a line of HOA volunteers in matching orange shirts were unloading more junk from pickup beds. My name is Raymond Keller. I was 56 years old. Has worked as an operations supervisor at a packaging plant outside Knoxville, and had lived on 5 wooded acres at the edge of Copper Ridge for 14 years. My house sat at the end of a gravel driveway behind a black steel gate. The gate was not fancy. It had a keypad, 2 stone posts, and a small wooden sign that said Keller Farm. The sign was old. My father made it after he sold me the property in 2011. I kept it because it reminded me of him. And because the place had always been known as Keller Farm, even after the cows were gone and the old pasture turned into a field of wild grass, Copper Ridge came later. The subdivision had started as 30 homes on the ridge above me, then grew into more than 300. At first, I got along fine with most people there. I did not belong to the HOA. My land was outside its boundary. But I bought mulch from a resident who ran a landscaping business. I helped one family pull a truck out of a muddy ditch after a storm. I let kids from the neighborhood fish at my pond when they asked first. I was not looking for a fight, but I did not like people treating my gate like it was the edge of their community dump. I walked down the driveway in boots and an old work jacket, still holding my coffee. A woman in an orange shirt saw me at the gate. "Oh," she said. "Good morning. We're almost done." "Done with what?" "The cleanup collection. You put a dumpster across my driveway." She looked at the dumpster, then at the gate. "It's only for today. It is blocking my truck." It was the widest turnout available. I looked around. There was a county-maintained gravel lot less than 200 yards down the road. It had enough room for 4 dumpsters. "Who told you to put it here?" She pointed uphill. "Linda Carver is coordinating it." Of course she was. Linda had been Copper Ridge HOA president for nearly 3 years. She was the kind of person who could turn a neighborhood picnic into a policy announcement. Everything had a slogan. Everything had a volunteer sign-up sheet. Everything had to look like a success in the HOA newsletter. 2 weeks earlier, she announced Copper Ridge's Spring Pride Cleanup Weekend. Residents could bring old furniture, renovation debris, bags of trash, broken appliances, and anything else they wanted removed. The HOA would provide dumpsters at no cost to homeowners. That phrase had bothered me when I read it. Nothing is free when a homeowners association says it is free. Somebody pays. Usually residents, sometimes contractors, sometimes the person standing closest to the mess. But I did not think the cleanup had anything to do with me until I saw that dumpster at my gate. I walked around it carefully. The dumpster wheels had crushed the edge of my gravel drive. A delivery truck had apparently backed it into the shallow ditch near the gate, tearing up my mailbox post and bending one of the reflective markers I used to keep cars out of the culvert. Worse than that, there was a thick streak of dark liquid running from beneath the dumpster toward the road. I crouched down. The smell hit me immediately. Old paint, rotting food, something chemical. I stood up and looked at the volunteer. "Who is the hauler?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Linda arranged it." Where is she? Up at the clubhouse. I took photographs. The dumpster. The blocked gate. The damaged mailbox post. The leaking liquid. The license plate on the hauling truck. Then I called Linda. She answered on the fourth ring. Raymond. I'm in the middle of coordinating the event. You put a dumpster across my driveway. It is temporary. It is blocking my gate. We needed a safe collection point. You needed a safe collection point on property you did not own. It is just for one day. I have to leave for work. Can you use another exit? My property has one exit. She sighed. Raymond. This cleanup is helping hundreds of families. We are trying to keep the roads clear. You blocked my road. The dumpster will be moved before the end of the day. I need it moved now. Her voice went cold. You are being unreasonable. No. I am telling you to remove a dumpster from my driveway. It is not technically on your driveway. It is on the county shoulder. I looked at the blue metal box sitting across both gate leaves. It is blocking access to my driveway. You can wait a few hours. I said, I'm calling the county. Linda laughed softly. Over a community cleanup. Over a dumpster full of trash leaking at my gate. She paused. Then she said, do what you think you need to do. I did. First, I called my plant supervisor and told him I would be late. Then I called the county solid waste office. The man who answered asked whether the dumpster was on public property or private property. I said, it is on the county shoulder. But it blocks the only entrance to my private property and is leaking unknown waste into a roadside ditch. That changed his tone. He asked for the company name. I read it from the side of the truck. Blue Ridge Disposal Services. He asked for the vehicle plate number. I gave him that too. Then he asked whether I had photographs. I have plenty. He told me to email them immediately and said an environmental compliance officer would inspect the site as soon as one was available. While I waited, the cleanup got worse. More people arrived. They brought mattresses, broken patio furniture, bags of leaves, old televisions, and construction debris. One man opened the tailgate of his truck and rolled out a pile of shattered tile. A woman in a white SUV dropped off 4 black trash bags and then drove away before the volunteer could tell her which dumpster to use. The bags split when they hit the ground. Fast food containers, used diapers, and empty bottles scattered beside my gate. I stepped outside again. Stop putting bags on the ground. The volunteer looked overwhelmed. The main dumpster is full. Then stop collecting trash. I can't make that decision. Who can? She looked uphill. Linda. I called Linda again. This time, she did not answer. So I sent her a text. Your dumpster is full. Leaking. Blocking my driveway. And residents are dumping bags on the ground beside my gate. Remove it immediately. This is your notice. The message showed delivered. No reply. At nowo do isprezece. I heard an engine coming up the road. Another Blue Ridge disposal truck stopped beside the first one. I thought they were finally replacing the full dumpster. Instead, the driver dropped a second dumpster on the other side of my gate. Now my entrance was boxed in. One dumpster blocked the left gate leaf. The other blocked the right side and crushed the grass near my fence post. The driver got out, looked at me standing there, and said, "Morning. Who told you to put that there?" He checked a work order on a clipboard. Copper Ridge Community Collection. Site 2. This is not Site 2. This is my gate. It's what the route says. Show me. He hesitated. Then he handed me the paper. The work order listed 2 locations: Copper Ridge Clubhouse, Keller Farm Roadside Collection Point. There was no Keller Farm Road. There was only Keller Farm, my private property. The customer name was Copper Ridge Community Services, LLC, and below it was a handwritten note. Use both sides of gate. Keep clubhouse lot clear for event parking. I stared at the note. Linda had not made a mistake. She had used my gate as a dumpster site, so the clubhouse parking lot would look clean for the HOA's sponsored spring festival. The volunteers were not just collecting trash, they were staging it at my entrance. Out of sight of the community event, I asked the driver, "Who wrote this?" He shrugged. "Dispatch received it from the customer." "Who is the customer?" "Copper Ridge Community Services." "Who signed the contract?" He pointed to the lower line. The signature was Richard Carver's, Linda's husband. The name meant something because Richard owned a small hauling consulting company that the HOA had hired before for landscaping, holiday lighting, and event coordination. He was not supposed to be managing waste disposal. But somehow, his name was on a contract involving 2 dumpsters, 6 hauling trucks, and a cleanup service billed at $18. Ube. I took a picture of the work order. Then I noticed another line near the bottom. Disposal site, East Ridge Transfer Facility. I knew that place. It was a licensed transfer station, but it charged separate rates for household trash. Construction debris. Matres. Appliances. Electronics. Paint. And hazardous materials. A 40-yard dumpster full of mixed waste could not legally be handled as simple community trash. Not if it contained paint cans, television sets, chemicals, and old renovation debris. The cleanup was already disorganized, but the contract showed something worse. Copper Ridge had promised the hauler that every dumpster would contain non-hazardous municipal solid waste only. That was not what residents were dumping at my gate. Adzice patru. A county environmental compliance truck arrived. The officer was a woman named Marisol Vega. She wore a gray uniform, rubber gloves, and the expression of someone who had seen enough illegal dump sites to know exactly when people were lying. She photographed both dumpsters, the leaking liquid, the split bags, and the blocked gate. Then she asked the driver for the hauling manifest. He handed it to her. She looked at the work order. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Keller, did you authorize this collection site?" "No." "Did anyone ask permission to use your entrance?" "No." "Has the HOA ever used your property for waste storage before?" "No." Marisol walked over to the first dumpster and looked inside. She did not climb in. She did not need to. The top layer told the story. There were paint cans, old fluorescent tubes, a broken flat-screen television, a bag of loose insulation, a container with what looked like motor oil pooled around the lid. She turned to the driver. "Your manifest says household trash only." He looked toward the road. "I just pick up what they load." Marisol nodded. "Then you need to stop taking it until the waste is properly identified." The driver called dispatch. The volunteers stopped unloading. And the cleanup event that had been advertised as a cheerful neighborhood service suddenly became a row of leaking dumpsters trapped across my gate. Linda arrived 20 minutes later. She stepped out of her SUV, took one look at the county truck, and walked straight toward Marisol. "This is a private HOA event," she said. "We have a contract with the hauler." Marisol looked at her badge. "Not when it blocks private access and involves improperly classified waste." Linda glanced at me. This is being escalated because Raymond has a personal issue with the HOA. I said, my personal issue is that you used my front gate as a trash dump. Linda smiled tightly. It is a temporary staging area. It is private property access. It is a county shoulder. It is still blocking my only entrance. Marisol interrupted. Mom. Who authorized Keller Farm roadside collection point? Linda did not answer. Marisol held up the work order. Your husband signed the hauling contract. The site note directs the hauler to use both sides of Mr. Keller's gate. Did the HOA board approve that location? Linda looked at Richard's signature. Then she said, I will need to review the paperwork. Marisol nodded. You will also need to provide the board approval. The disposal manifests. And the waste management plan. Until then, no additional waste can be accepted here. Linda's face went pale. Not because two dumpsters were sitting at my gate. Because for the first time, somebody outside the HOA was looking at the contract she thought nobody would read. And as Marisol walked toward the second dumpster, one of the split black bags near my fence tore open in the wind. A stack of printed invoices scattered across the gravel. They were not household trash. They were billing records from Copper Ridge Community Services, and the top invoice showed that Richard Carver had charged the HOA nearly 3 times the hauler's actual rate for every dumpster sitting in front of my house. The vacant lot sat less than a mile from Copper Ridge, behind a shuttered furniture warehouse near the old state highway. I did not go there myself. That was the first thing Rebecca told me when I called her. Do not trespass. Do not take pictures through a fence. Do not confront Richard. The county has the GPS records. Let them inspect it. So I waited. 3 days later, Marisol called with an update. The county had obtained permission to inspect the lot because it was listed as the registered business address for one of Richard Carver's companies. What they found was not a legal waste storage operation. It was an open patch of gravel behind a locked chain-link fence. There were stacks of old carpet, broken drywall, appliances, bags of insulation, discarded cabinets, paint cans, and several black trash bags that looked exactly like the ones that had split open beside my gate. The county did not call it a landfill. It was not large enough for that, but it was an unauthorized waste storage site. Richard had used the Copper Ridge cleanup weekend to collect more debris than the HOA had approved. Charged the HOA for more dumpsters than it actually received, and moved part of the waste to a lot controlled by his own company, instead of sending it directly to the licensed transfer station. The reason became clear when the county accountant reviewed the invoices. Richard's company billed Copper Ridge HOA for 4 full disposal loads, plus 2 emergency overflow collections, plus a hazard sorting fee. The HOA was charged $28. Nuisance 40 in total. Blue Ridge Disposal had billed Richard's company $6. 240. The transfer station had records for 2 actual loads. That left more than $22,000 in fees with no matching disposal service. And some of the waste had ended up in front of my gate. Marisol forwarded the county findings to the Solid Waste Enforcement Unit and the county fraud investigator. She also sent the report to Copper Ridge's property management company because the HOA needed to know what had been done in its name. The board called an emergency meeting that Thursday. This time, Linda could not keep the story contained in a newsletter. Residents had copies of the hauling invoices. They had copies of the Blue Ridge GPS logs. They had copies of the photographs from the illegal storage lot. And someone had posted my gate camera footage in the community group. The video was simple. Linda's SUV arriving before dawn. The driver receiving instructions. The dumpster being positioned directly across my entrance. A volunteer moving the cleanup sign so the dumpster would not appear in event photographs. There was no dramatic music. There did not need to be. The truth was right there on the screen. I attended the meeting because several residents asked me to. The clubhouse was full. People stood along the walls. A few had brought folders. Others were holding their phones with the invoice numbers pulled up. Linda sat at the front table beside Richard. For the first time since I met her, she looked unsure of what to say. The property management representative began by reading the county findings into the record. Copper Ridge Community Services had entered into the cleanup contract without full board disclosure. Richard Carver had failed to disclose his ownership interest. The cleanup invoices exceeded the underlying hauling cost by more than $22,000. The dumpsters had been placed at my gate without owner permission, and waste connected to the event had been found at an unauthorized storage site associated with Richard's business. When the representative finished, Celeste Warren stood up from the second row. She was the retired school principal who had challenged Linda during the solar project dispute. She looked straight at the board table. Did the HOA approve Keller Farm roadside collection point? Linda said. The event required flexible logistics. That was not my question. Linda looked at Richard. Richard looked down at the table. Celeste asked again. Did the board approve using Mr. Keller's gate as a collection point? Linda finally said. The board approved the cleanup event. No. The room went quiet. Then a man near the back asked why the clubhouse parking lot had been kept clear. Richard answered before Linda could. It was needed for the spring festival. The man said, So you moved the trash to someone else's gate? Richard said nothing. Another resident stood. Did you make money from this? Richard's attorney, who had appeared halfway through the meeting, immediately told him not to answer. But again, no answer was needed. The HOA voted that night to remove Linda and Richard from every board, committee, contractor, and community services role connected to Copper Ridge. The property management company terminated Richard's contracts the following morning. The county investigation continued. I did not follow every part of it. I had my own problem to solve. My gate still needed repair. The drainage ditch where the dumpster leaked still needed testing. My mailbox post had to be replaced. And I had lost a workday because I could not leave my own property. Rebecca sent Copper Ridge a detailed demand. The HOA would pay for the cleanup of the gate area, soil and ditch testing, replacement of the mailbox post and reflectors, gravel repair, missed work, security review, and legal costs. The total was $14. The new board did not fight it. Celeste came to my house with the settlement agreement a week later. She stood outside the gate. Not because I refused to let her in, but because she said she felt it was right to speak to me where the problem began. I'm sorry, she said. I know you didn't put the dumpster there. I voted for the cleanup budget without asking enough questions. That happens. It should not have happened here. She handed me the agreement. Copper Ridge would pay the full amount. The HOA would also adopt a written policy forbidding any contractor, event, committee, or board member from using private entrances, road shoulders, or adjacent parcels without written permission from the owner and documented county approval where necessary. The board would require open disclosure of any contract involving a board member, spouse, relative, or affiliated company. And every future waste collection event would use a licensed site with a written disposal plan. I read the agreement. Then I signed it. The cleanup of my gate area took 2 days. A certified environmental contractor removed the stained gravel, tested the soil, cleaned the ditch, and replaced the damaged reflectors, the test results did not show a major contamination problem. But there had been enough paint residue and leaking household waste to justify the work. The new mailbox post went in the following week. I painted it black to match the gate. For a while, every time I came home from work, I looked down the road before turning into my driveway. I expected to see another dumpster, another orange-shirted volunteer, another sign trying to turn private inconvenience into community pride. But nothing came. The county eventually resolved the disposal case through restitution, cleanup requirements, and a compliance agreement with Richard's company. I did not need every detail. The important part was that the unauthorized lot was cleaned. The HOA received records it should have seen before, and Richard could no longer use Copper Ridge contracts to move waste or money without oversight. Linda and Richard sold their house the following year. The new HOA board was not perfect. No board is. But they stopped acting like Copper Ridge ended wherever their convenience began. That summer, Celeste organized another neighborhood cleanup. This time, the dumpsters sat in a paved lot inside the HOA boundary. Each one had a label. Paint went in one place. Electronics went in another. Construction debris required its own container. Volunteers had a written plan. A licensed hauler. And enough room for every truck. No one parked anything near my gate. I drove past the event on my way home from work. Celeste Veil. I rolled down my window. Looks like you figured it out, I said. She smiled. We did something radical. What's that? We asked where the property line was before we ordered dumpsters. I laughed. It was a small thing, but that was the point. Most disputes do not start because people do not know what is right. They start because someone decides their convenience matters more than your boundary. Linda called the dumpsters temporary. Richard called them logistics. The HOA called them a community cleanup. But when a truck blocks the only gate to your home, when garbage leaks into your ditch, and when somebody uses your property to hide a mess they do not want their own neighbors to see, it is not community service. It is dumping. And sometimes the fastest way to expose a dirty deal is to let people see exactly where they left the trash. What would you have done if your HOA blocked your only gate with leaking dumpsters, then charged residents 3 times the real hauling cost? Would you have let them move the trash later? Or made sure every invoice and GPS record came into the open? This is a dramatized storytelling narrative based on real-life property dispute themes. Namis. Characters and specific circumstances are fictionalized. Visuals may be generated using AI tools for illustrative purposes only. At 6:07 on a Monday morning, I found a 4-inch electrical conduit buried under my vegetable garden. One end disappeared beneath the new EV charging station the HOA had built beside its clubhouse. The other end ran straight through my property toward the old transformer behind my workshop. I knew it was there because my tomatoes stopped growing. That may sound like a strange way to discover an electrical trespass, but I had spent 32 years as a commercial electrician before retiring. I knew the difference between a bad soil season and ground that had been dug up, compacted, and covered over by people hoping nobody noticed. The tomatoes along my western fence had been healthy on Friday. By Monday morning, 6 plants were bent over. The irrigation line had been cut. The soil was packed flat in a narrow strip running from the back corner of my workshop to the HOA boundary. I followed the strip until it reached a fresh patch of gravel behind the Copper Ridge clubhouse. That was where I saw the charging station. 8 bright green EV chargers stood in a row under a steel canopy. A new sign said, Copper Ridge Clean Drive Hub, Resident Charging, Smart Community Living. There were orange cones around the parking spaces, balloons tied to the sign. and a catering tent being set up for what looked like a grand opening. The chargers were impressive, clean, modern, probably expensive, and the heavy black conduit feeding them came from my side of the fence. My name is Frank Hollis. I was 61 years old, retired from commercial electrical work, and I had lived on a 6-acre property outside Knoxville for 26 years. When I bought the place, there was an old produce cooling barn behind the house. The barn had been used by a family orchard decades before I arrived. It had a 3-phase electrical service large enough to run refrigeration units, pumps, and loading equipment. The orchard was gone by the time I bought the land, but the service remained. I used part of the barn as a workshop. I restored old motorcycles, repaired generators for neighbors, and kept a small woodworking setup inside. I did not need the full electrical capacity most days, but I paid to keep the service active because upgrading or restoring it later would cost a fortune. The transformer and service equipment sat behind the barn on my property, inside a locked metal enclosure. Nobody from Copper Ridge had any right to touch it. I walked around the charging station slowly. The conduit emerged from the ground behind the canopy, passed beneath a new electrical cabinet, and disappeared under the fence line toward my garden. Fresh gravel covered most of the route, but the soil at the property boundary had been disturbed recently. I took photographs. The chargers, the conduit, the fence, the torn irrigation line, the flattened garden. Then I noticed something that made me stop. The electrical cabinet had a temporary inspection sticker on it. The sticker listed a permit number. I took a picture of that too. A man in a branded polo shirt came out from behind the canopy. "Can I help you?" "My name is Frank Hollis. Where does that conduit go?" He looked toward the cabinet. "It supplies the charging hub." "I know what it supplies. Where does it come from?" He checked his clipboard. "The project has a customer-provided power route." "Who is the customer?" "Copper Ridge Community Services." "Did they tell you they own the route?" He looked confused. "The engineering drawings show an existing utility corridor." "Show me." He hesitated. Then he handed me a laminated site plan. The plan showed the HOA clubhouse, the parking lot, the new chargers, and a blue line running from the charging hub west toward my barn. Beside the line was a label, "Existing Service Corridor." I pointed at it. "This crosses my property." The man looked at the map again. "It is shown as a utility easement." "Show me the recorded easement." "I don't have that." "You have a 4-inch conduit buried in my garden, and you do not have the easement." He lowered the clipboard. "Sir, I'm the installation supervisor. We were given a route by Copper Ridge's project manager." "Who is that?" "Kevin Mallory." I had heard the name before. Kevin was Copper Ridge's new board president. He was 40-something. Owned a chain of fitness studios, and had spent the last year promising to make the HOA future-ready. He liked projects with signs, logos, and ribbon cuttings. The EV charging station was his biggest announcement yet. 8 charging bays, solar canopy, smart billing app, a grand opening with local reporters invited, and apparently a power feed he had decided could run through my property without asking. I called Kevin. He answered after 2 rings. "Frank. Good morning. I hope you're coming by the opening on Saturday. You ran electrical conduit through my garden." There was a pause. Then he said, "The charging project. The cable crosses my property. The route follows an existing service corridor." "No. It follows my 3-phase service line." The engineer confirmed access. Which engineer? Frank. I'm in a meeting. Which engineer? Isahil. Caleb Price. He reviewed the old infrastructure maps. Did Caleb show you a recorded easement? The route has been in place for decades. My service has been in place for decades. That does not make it yours. Kevin's voice changed. The chargers are part of a community improvement. The system will reduce demand on the neighborhood and provide residents with modern infrastructure. You built it on a power route you do not own. We did not build it on your land. You buried conduit under my garden. It is a narrow access strip. It is my property. Frank. Nobody is trying to take anything from you. I looked down at the fresh trench cutting through the soil where my tomatoes had been. You already did. Kevin went quiet. Then he said, let's discuss it after the opening. No. Please do not make a public issue out of this. You should have thought about that before you dug. He hung up. I went back to my workshop and unlocked the transformer enclosure. The pad-mounted transformer was not utility-owned. I knew that because I had helped install it years ago when the old orchard service was upgraded before I bought the property. The utility brought power to the point of service. But the transformer disconnects. Distribution equipment beyond that belonged to the property owner, me. The enclosure had a heavy lock on it. The lock was gone. In its place was a new silver padlock I had never seen before. For a second, I stood there staring at it. Then I felt the kind of cold anger that does not make you yell. It makes you slow down. Someone had not only crossed my property, someone had replaced the lock on my electrical equipment. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Marcus Bell arrived 40 minutes later. I showed him the new padlock, the route through the garden, the permit sticker, and the site plan. He asked Kevin's project manager to come out. A man named Caleb Price arrived in a pickup truck with Copper Ridge decals on the side. He was younger than I expected. Maybe mid-30s. With a clean, hard hat and a tablet. Deputy Bell asked him whether he had written authorization from me to access the transformer enclosure. Caleb said, the project team understood the service equipment was part of a legacy utility corridor. Deputy Bell asked, do you have a document showing that? Caleb opened several files on his tablet. He pulled up an aerial map from 1998. The map showed an old service road near the barn. It did not show an easement. Then he pulled up a county utility overlay. A thin dotted line ran near my property, but the line did not match the actual route of the conduit. It marked a retired telephone cable that ended at the old orchard gate more than 100 feet from the transformer. Deputy Bell looked at Caleb. This does not authorize access to Mr. Hollis's equipment. Caleb said. The engineer interpreted the corridor as available for shared service. I said, your engineer interpreted my property as available. Deputy Bell told Caleb that I had clearly withdrawn permission. That the new lock could not remain on my equipment. And that no one should enter the property or operate the connection without documented authority. Caleb looked toward the charging station. Mr. Hollis. This system is nearly complete. The HOA has already spent over $300,000. That is not my bill. The project is scheduled for commissioning this weekend. Then you should have checked the route before you spent the money. He looked at the deputy. Can he stop us from using the service? Deputy Bell answered carefully. This is not a criminal court. I am not making a final title decision, but you have been notified that the property owner disputes the access. If you continue without verified rights, you are taking a risk. The project crew left the charging station that afternoon. The balloons stayed tied to the sign. The catering tent stayed folded near the clubhouse, but the electrical cabinet remained silent. No charger lights. No power screen. No grand opening. I called a lawyer named Marissa Vale. She had handled utility easement cases before. And when I told her about the conduit and the replaced lock, she asked one question first. Have they energized the system? I don't think so. Good. Why good? Because once a project is energized, the people start acting like the investment itself creates a right to keep it. We need to move before that happens. She came out to the property the next day with an electrical engineer named Tom Weller. Tom inspected the conduit route, the transformer enclosure, and the EV charging cabinet. He found something that none of us expected. The HOA's new feeder line was not merely crossing my property. It had been connected to the load side of my private transformer. If the system had been energized as planned, the charging station would have drawn power through equipment I owned and maintained. The HOA had not installed a separate utility service. It had built 8 EV chargers around my electrical infrastructure. Tom looked at the cable termination inside the enclosure and shook his head. Frank, this is worse than a property access issue. What is it? It is an unapproved connection to privately owned high-voltage equipment. They cannot legally energize this without your written authorization. An engineering study. Utility approval. And new protective equipment. Could it damage the transformer? It could overload it. It could create fault risks. And if something fails, everyone will start asking why your equipment was feeding an HOA charging station. I looked through the open enclosure toward the bright green chargers beyond the fence. Kevin had not just used my garden as a shortcut. He had built his future-ready community project on equipment he did not own. And when Marissa pulled the county permit file that evening, we found the final piece of the problem. The electrical permit application listed the transformer owner as Copper Ridge HOA. Kevin Mallory had signed the document himself. He had claimed my equipment as community property, and he had done it in writing. The removal crew arrived the following Tuesday morning. They did not come with balloons, catering tents, or a ribbon-cutting banner. They came with an electrician, 2 utility compliance inspectors, a Green Trail project manager, and a pickup truck full of cable recovery equipment. The first thing they did was open my transformer enclosure. The silver padlock Kevin's crew had placed on it had already been removed under the county inspection order. My original lock was back on the gate, but the new feeder cable remained inside the enclosure. Connected to equipment it never should have touched. Tom Weller stood beside the utility inspector while they disconnected it. The cable was heavy, thick, and expensive. It had been run through the conduit under my garden, beneath the fence, and into the charger cabinet across the HOA property line. For nearly 3 weeks, Copper Ridge had treated it like the final piece of a community project. Now it was evidence. The utility inspector photographed every connection before it was removed. He documented the missing authorization, the lack of a proper load study, and the fact that the transformer had never been designed to serve a charging hub. Then the Green Trail electrician shut off the cabinet and pulled the feeder loose. I watched from my garden. The conduit was exposed in sections as the crew worked backward. Fresh soil came up with it. My cut irrigation line appeared beneath the dirt. The roots of several tomato plants had been torn away where the crew had bored through the garden bed. The charging station was still standing when they finished. 8 green chargers, a polished solar canopy, fresh pavement, a large sign promising smart community living. But without the feeder line, it was nothing but a row of expensive empty boxes. The utility issued its final determination 2 days later. Copper Ridge could not reconnect the station to my equipment. The HOA could not claim an easement based on the old service route map. The county permit was revoked because the ownership certification and electrical design were inaccurate. If Copper Ridge wanted EV chargers, it would need to apply for a completely new service through the utility. Build a transformer pad inside HOA property. Obtain a new engineering study. Upgrade its distribution equipment. And submit a fresh permit application. The utility estimate for that work was $468. Ling ling ling. That number did not include the money Copper Ridge had already spent. The HOA had paid $342. 000 for the original project. It now faced a $468. 000 utility upgrade if it wanted to make the chargers operational. Green Trail Charging Systems demanded payment for the removal, redesign, and remobilization costs. The county assessed permit review and inspection fees. The HOA's insurance carrier reviewed the false ownership statement and refused to cover any loss tied to Kevin's intentional certification. The total cost of Kevin's future-ready charging station climbed past $900. Ling ling ling. And not one car had charged there. The Copper Ridge Board hired an independent attorney and an electrical engineer to review the project. Their report was direct. The HOA had approved the charging station without verifying the ownership of the electrical equipment it planned to use. It had relied on an outdated infrastructure map. It had failed to obtain a utility capacity study. It had not disclosed that Kevin's fitness studio company had been negotiating discounted charging subscriptions for its members through the same vendor. And Kevin had signed a permit statement claiming ownership of equipment that was located on my private property. The report did not call him a thief. It did not need to. It said he had made representations he did not have authority to make. That was enough. Kevin resigned as board president before the next HOA meeting. He also stepped down from the community services company that had managed the charging contract. The new board terminated the project agreement with Green Trail and voted not to pursue the utility upgrade. The chargers were eventually removed. The solar canopy was dismantled. The parking spaces were repainted. The concrete pads were left in place for a while, then converted into ordinary visitor parking. It was not dramatic. No wrecking ball came through the clubhouse lot. No one was arrested in front of the neighbors. But every Copper Ridge resident could see what remained after Kevin's project was gone. 8 faded green parking spaces, a dead electrical cabinet, and nearly $1 million in reserve funds. Contractor claims and corrective costs that had been spent because somebody decided my transformer was easier to take than a proper utility service was to build. My part of the settlement was smaller. Marissa documented everything. The damaged garden, the cut irrigation line, the disturbed soil, the transformer inspection, the security upgrade for the enclosure, the engineering review, the workdays I lost while the county and utility inspected the connection. The total came to $31. Bye-bye, Slisher. Copper Ridge paid it. The new board did not argue. Celeste Warren came to my workshop with the settlement agreement in one hand and a box of tomato seedlings in the other. I looked at the seedlings. What is this? An apology. She said, "You don't have to buy me tomatoes." I know, but I thought you might want to start the garden again. I took the box from her. Thank you. She looked toward the transformer enclosure. The board should have asked before it assumed anything. Yes. We have a new policy now. Any project involving private property, service access, utilities, or outside contractors has to be reviewed by an independent engineer and a title attorney before money is approved. That sounds expensive. It is cheaper than what Kevin did. I could not argue with that. The transformer enclosure was repaired and re-inspected. Tom confirmed that the temporary connection had not damaged the equipment. I replaced the lock with a heavy-duty electronic access lock and installed a camera facing the garden and the service route. Then I rebuilt the garden. The first season after the trench, the soil was not right. The tomatoes were smaller. The peppers took longer. I had to replace the drip line and bring in fresh compost. But by the next summer, the garden came back. One evening, I was watering the plants when I heard a car pull into the old charging station lot. A resident got out, looked at the empty spaces, then turned around and parked near the clubhouse. For a moment, I thought about how easy it would have been for Copper Ridge to do this right. They could have asked the utility for a service study. They could have built a transformer pad on HOA land. They could have designed the project around equipment they actually owned. It would have taken longer. It would have cost more. But it would have worked. Instead, Kevin wanted the grand opening first. He wanted the photo, the sign, the app, and the announcement that Copper Ridge had become a modern community. He thought the hardest part of the project was getting the chargers installed. It was not. The hardest part was respecting the line between his property and mine. He never did. And that was why the only thing those chargers ever powered was a lesson. You cannot build a clean energy future by plugging into someone else's land without asking. What would you have done if your HOA buried a high-voltage cable under your garden, replaced the lock on your transformer, and claimed your equipment was community property? Would you have accepted a 20-year easement or made the utility cut the entire station off? This is a dramatized storytelling narrative based on real-life HOA and property dispute themes. Names, characters, and specific circumstances are fictionalized. Visuals may be generated using AI tools for illustrative purposes only.